My name is Sable Nakamura, and if you ask anyone in Maplebridge, Vermont who I am, they'll flick their eyes toward the red clapboard storefront with the hand-painted sign, Harlow's Stitch and Story. They'll say I'm Harlow's niece, the one who left for Boston and digital work, the one who came back late. They'll never say I'm the girl who used to fall asleep under a quilt of stars my mother stitched before her heart forgot to keep going. They don't have to. The town remembers in quieter ways. Pie left on stoops, names spoken in kitchens, and a garden that tells stories with flowers. The memorial quilt garden sat behind the shop, just past the lilac bushes. Each bed was a pattern. Log cabin in marigolds, flying geese in triangular tulips, a kaleidoscope of zinnias for starburst. My mother chose the first colors. Harlow chose the rest after Mom died, and every year, women and men came with seed packets and stories. Your mother taught me French seams, said Mrs. Keegan, pressing sugar snap peas into my palm. She hemmed my prom dress while I cried over a boy, said June from the co-op as she tucked in foxgloves. When the maples finally shrugged into September, the marigolds burned gold like little suns. I stepped into the garden and inhaled the peppery sweet scent and tried to feel steady. Here, Harlow said, easing a steaming mug into my hands. She is 67 and small in the way willow trees are small, only until the wind picks up. Cider. It'll help. It's perfect, I said, which wasn't true. The cider was too hot and my heart was scattered pins, because the letter was still on the work table inside. An official seal. A tone that thinks it's being kind while it's cutting. The Maplebridge Select Board regrets to inform you that Parcel B, rear portion of Lot 14B, has been sold to North Slope Development for mixed-use revitalization. Easement access will be terminated effective October 15th. Please vacate all plantings and personal property by that date. Parcel B was the back lot, the one with the garden. I kept rereading the line about personal property, as if the word could hold something as alive as stories, as if label makers and legalese could classify grief and marigolds. They didn't even ask, I said to Harlow. My voice sounded tinny, like I was listening to myself through a phone. Did you know? She took off her glasses, cleaned the lenses with the hem of her apron, and put them back on with decisive tenderness. I knew they were talking. I didn't think they'd do it without a hearing. They had a hearing, said a voice from the fence. June leaned over the pickets in her co-op sweatshirt. She had that expression locals wear when they bring you news nobody should ever have to carry. Last Tuesday, tucked under old business, 5 minutes, voted 3-2. Folks thought it was about resurfacing the library lot. My mouth went dry. They sold Mom's garden in 5 minutes. Harlow's hand found my elbow. Our garden, she said gently, then with more iron. And we are not done. She always said we were a quilt block. Separate shapes, stronger together. The bell over the shop door tinkled, and the day kept doing its ordinary things. A teenager came in needing satin ribbon. A carpenter dropped off a ripped jacket for mending. Harlow threaded needles and told stories with her hands. I rang up purchases and smiled while a hard, furious fizz opened under my ribs. After lunch, I walked the property line with the letter in my back pocket. The boundary ran along a low stone wall, lichen-dusted, perfect for sitting. The other side had already been staked with fluorescent flags, like someone had pressed thumbtacks into a map. A white SUV idled at the end of the dirt lane. A man in sharp boots and a navy vest slid out, eyes on a tablet. He moved like the land was a spreadsheet. Afternoon, he said, flashing a smile that arrived without his eyes. Sable, right? I'm Trevor with North Slope. We're excited to bring a new chapter to Maplebridge. That's funny, I said. We already have a story. He gestured at the garden with his stylus. We'll need this back portion for parking and deliveries. We're going to activate this corridor. Activate? My laugh came out brittle. Did the land deactivate while we weren't looking? He took a breath, the kind that says he's been trained for difficult stakeholders. Look, I get it. Sentimental value. But we're adding jobs and tax base. There's a community benefit fund, $10,000, set aside for a plaque or something. We can memorialize your family history. By paving it, I said. He shrugged. Progress requires trade-offs. I'm a digital project manager, I said, surprising both of us. I traffic in progress. I also traffic in deadlines. Whose deadline decided our grief had to end by October 15th? He checked his screen. Permit processes aren't personal. Everything is personal, I said, and realized I believed it with my entire body. He shifted. We're within our rights. Maybe the town isn't, I said. I didn't yet know what I meant. Only that the words tasted like the edge of something B-sharp, dangerous and true. That night, I slept on Harlow's couch, tired past reason. The house smelled like cedar and starch and orange peel. Rain whispered against the roof. I dreamed I was under my mother's star quilt, and the stitches were roads and the roads were choices, and my hands were too small to hold them all. In the morning, I woke to sunlight pooling on the wood floor and Harlow at the kitchen table with a stack of binders. Minutes, she said, tapping the papers. Her gray hair was twisted into a clip, and the coffee in her mug had graduated into determination. Maplebridge keeps everything. My mother made sure of it when she clerked. Bless her librarian soul. We read. We found the meeting notes. Thin as rice paper, the decision tucked between a road salt purchase and a pumpkin festival permit. We found, too, an old line from a 1998 town vote establishing the backlot as public green space to be maintained in perpetuity as a memorial garden for Maplebridge citizens past and present. I stared. In perpetuity. Harlow nodded. I remember that meeting. Your mother spoke. She wore that green scarf with the frayed ends. She said, "When we remember together, we belong together." Something clicked inside me, like a bobbin sliding into place. If the town had voted to protect the garden, how could they sell it? How could a 3-2 vote erase a community promise? June brought over blueberry muffins and a rumor. Trevor's crew is planning a soil test Thursday, she said, lowering her voice like the gossip could crack porcelain. They'll roll in at 8. Today was Tuesday. 2 days. I stood in the doorway and looked at the garden. The zinnias tilted in their beds like hyped-up cheerleaders. The marigolds were little suns. The wind moved through the dill and cilantro, carrying the smell of summer back over my skin. I remembered my mother teaching me to quilt. Measure twice, cut once, she'd said, then laughed. No, that's carpentry. For us, it's press, don't iron. Let the heat coax the fibers, don't shove them. She made quilts the way other people made plans, intentionally, with respect. I pulled my phone out and scrolled through the town website. I kept seeing phrases like conservation easement and special town meeting and revocation of permits. The more I read, the less I understood, and the more I burned. I can't just watch them take it, I said. Harlow looked up from the binder. So we don't. We'll need people, I said. Not just us. We have people, she said. They bring seeds. They bring stories. Stories. I glanced at the shop sign, the looping script, the word story tucked there like an afterthought and the main point. And a plan flickered, small and bright. What if the garden isn't just a garden? I said. What if it's a stage? An exhibit that the town can't ignore. We make the stories visible. We turn the land itself into a narrative. Harlow's eyes sharpened like a needle finding its groove. A storytelling quilt. Exactly, I said, but not just a quilt. A whole show. Photos. Voices. The names of everyone who planted here. The veterans who have benches under the birch. The kids who learned their colors off these blooms. And we tie it to the old vote, Harlow said. We're not starting from scratch. We stand on their words, I said, and my chest filled with something that felt like oxygen after a held breath. The bell over the door chimed again. This time it was Mrs. Keegan, cheeks flushed. I heard, she said. My sister texted me from the salon. What do you need? An hour later, there were 5 of us around the table. By late afternoon, there were 12, then 16. People brought school photos and shoeboxes of Polaroids, dog-eared programs from retirements and weddings, quilt blocks stitched for births and losses. Someone unearthed a cassette tape of my mother telling a story at the Maplebridge Library in 1998. June called her cousin who runs the community radio station. We can air clips, she said, if you can get them to me fast. I made lists. I assigned tasks. My project manager brain clicked into work mode, but this time the project was us. Around 6, the first Facebook post hit. Save the quilt garden in all caps with a photo of Harlow and me holding the old in perpetuity vote. Shares multiplied like dandelion seeds. At 7:30, the white SUV returned. Trevor stood at the fence, hands tucked into his vest pockets, looking at the commotion like it was an unexpected line item. He waited until there was a lull and then called out, "You know this won't change anything, right?" I wiped my hands on my jeans and went to the fence. "Everything changes everything," I said. "Hasn't anyone ever told you a story?" He smiled in a way that wasn't a smile. "Thursday, 8 a.m. We're coming. Don't get in the way of the equipment." My stomach dipped, but I kept my voice calm. "We'll be here." He leaned in, lower voice. "Look, Sable, right?" The board signed. The check cleared. "Don't make this ugly." "It already is," I said. After he left, the sky went violets and bruises. The first stars stitched themselves between clouds. People kept bringing things. Photos, a hand-knit sweater my mother had fixed, a ribbon from my 4th grade science fair that Harlow had kept for some reason that made my eyes sting. We were building something that could hold us. At 10, I locked the door. The shop hummed with the particular quiet that comes after a day that mattered. Harlow covered the binders with a clean tea towel like tucking in a child. "We'll make it beautiful," she said. "We'll make it true." I nodded. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from urgency, from the sense that the ground had stopped sliding and I'd found my footing again. I fell into the couch, phone on my chest, and stared at the ceiling fan blur. I should have felt hope. Instead, the message arrived. From anon.townhall@maplebridge.gov. Subject: RE. Public Records Request Body. Not sure you saw? There's a special work session tomorrow at 7 a.m. They're adding an emergency item. You might want to attend. My chest went cold. Emergency item? At 7? I bolted upright and ran for the kitchen. "Harlow," I said, breathless. "They're moving faster." She looked up, eyes sharp, hands already reaching for her keys. And then we heard it, the low growl of diesel on the road, earlier than dawn, closer than it had any right to be. Headlights dragged across the ceiling. The bulldozer was coming 2 days early. I stood barefoot on the kitchen tile, heart pounding, and knew there wouldn't be time for careful lists or neat seams. I grabbed my coat. "I'm not letting them cut the garden," I said. Harlow nodded once, fierce as tinder. We ran into the dark. I've heard people say anger makes you brave. That's a lie. Anger makes you loud. Fear makes you fast. But only love makes you stand in front of a moving bulldozer at 6:30 in the morning, hair unbrushed, coat buttoned wrong, feet numb in the Vermont dew. The machine growled at the edge of the lane like a metal beast waking up. Its headlights sliced through the fog rolling off the hills. Behind it idled a flatbed truck and a pair of pickup trucks, hazard lights pulsing like a heartbeat. "Stay back," Harlow hissed, clutching my arm. I didn't move. Trevor stood beside the operator, clipboard in hand, vest zipped high against the chill. He looked at us like we were inconvenient weeds. "You're early," I called, voice trembling but loud. He tilted his head. "Town session bumped up our timeline. Soil test today, not Thursday. Paperwork's all clear." I glanced behind me. Only 3 people had shown up this early. June in her co-op sweatshirt, old Mr. McBride from the VFW with his cane, and 17-year-old Lucy, who worked part-time at the shop and had ridden over on her bike, still in pajama pants. 4 of us, against engines and permits and men with neon vests. "You can't just start," I said. "Watch me," Trevor replied. He tapped the bulldozer's side and the operator revved the engine. Harlow stepped forward, her voice calm and iron. "This garden was dedicated in perpetuity. That means forever. You don't get to mow through forever." Trevor smirked. "Ma'am, the board voted. Forever's flexible." The operator nudged the lever. The bulldozer inched forward, gravel crunching under its steel tracks. And something in me snapped. I walked straight into the path and planted myself in front of the blade. My legs shook, but I kept my chin up. "Then you'll have to run me over first." "Jesus," the operator muttered, pulling the brake. Trevor's face pinched. "You're trespassing." "It's my land," I shot back. "My family's land. My mother's garden. You don't get to erase her with paperwork." More voices rose behind us. Mrs. Keegan, out of breath with curlers still in her hair. The Reed twins with their high school hoodies. A couple of folks from the diner, still smelling of bacon grease and coffee. Word was spreading faster than I expected. Within minutes, we had a dozen people lined up along the garden edge, arms crossed, coffee cups steaming. They weren't armed with anything but stubbornness and community, but it was enough to make the bulldozer idle silent. Trevor pinched the bridge of his nose. "Fine. You've made your point. We'll regroup." He waved the operator back, muttering into his phone as they pulled the machines down the lane. When the last taillight vanished, my knees buckled. Harlow grabbed my elbow, steadying me. "You nearly got flattened," she whispered, though her eyes glittered with a pride she didn't bother hiding. "I wasn't going to move," I admitted, my voice shaking. "I know," she said. The crowd thinned as folks headed to work. June lingered, pressing a thermos of coffee into my hands. That was gutsy. But gutsy isn't enough. They'll be back, with more paper this time. She was right. The machines might be gone for the morning, but Trevor wasn't bluffing. He'd push through the town council, the zoning board, whatever committee would rubber stamp his permits. We needed something stronger than outrage, stronger than standing in front of a blade. Harlow brushed dirt off her apron and looked at me with the same expression she wore when lining up stitches. "You mentioned an exhibit." I nodded. "Yeah, a storytelling quilt. Not just fabric. Photos, recordings, everything people have tied to this land. If the town sees it, really sees it, they can't vote it away." Her lips curved, equal parts sorrow and resolve. "Then we'd better start sewing." That afternoon, the shop buzzed like a beehive. Every time the bell rang, someone brought something new. A shoebox of Polaroids, a bundle of pressed flowers, a scrap of fabric from a wedding dress. Lucy spread them across the cutting table. "This is more than a quilt," she said. "It's like a town memory bank." "Exactly," I said. My project manager brain kicked in, sketching flowcharts on sticky notes. "We'll map stories to blocks. Each person's contribution gets stitched into a panel. The final quilt will hang as the centerpiece of the exhibit. Around it, we'll set up photos, recordings, journals, like a museum." "Where?" June asked. I hesitated. The shop was too small. The community hall was booked solid through October. Then Harlow tapped the counter. "The library." My mother fought to keep that wing open. They owe us a favor. By sundown, we had volunteers cataloging items, teenagers scanning photos, and Lucy setting up a spreadsheet. It wasn't polished, but it was moving. That night, I collapsed on the couch again, brain buzzing. My phone lit up with a new email. From Trevor. Subject: friendly warning. Body: blocking construction equipment is a crime. Don't push me. Courts move faster than quilts. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. For a flicker of a second, doubt gnawed. What if he was right? What if we were fighting the inevitable with scraps of fabric and nostalgia? Then my eyes fell on the star quilt folded over the couch arm. My mother's stitches, uneven in places, but steady. She hadn't sewn perfection. She'd sewn permanence. I typed back, my hands steady. Reply, then see you in court. And at the library. I hit send, closed the laptop, and whispered into the dark. They think forever is flexible. Let's show them it isn't. But as I drifted off, I couldn't shake the image of that bulldozer, headlights glowing through the fog, because I knew it would be back. And next time, words might not stop it. By morning, the story had already outrun us. At the diner, the counter was buzzing with talk. At the post office, I caught the words "quilt garden" whispered between mail slots. Someone had uploaded a video, me standing in front of the bulldozer. Shaky cell phone footage, but clear enough to show the blade looming over me and my voice cutting sharp through the fog. Then you'll have to run me over first. By breakfast, the clip had over 2,000 views. In Maplebridge, that's practically viral. When I walked into the quilt shop, Harlow was already at the cutting table, sorting fabric scraps into piles like a general laying out battle plans. She didn't even look up. "You're famous," I groaned. I wasn't trying to be. "Doesn't matter," she said. "The story's moving. Let it." That day, the library agreed to host our exhibit. The director, Mrs. Fowler, pursed her lips the whole time, like she was already regretting saying yes. But the second she saw the box of Polaroids, kids with popsicles in front of the marigolds, couples under the birch trees, a 4th of July picnic spread on the lawn, her eyes softened. "You'll need the whole community room," she admitted. "I'll shuffle the book club." "Thank you," I said, relief washing through me. But relief lasted only until I got the text from June. Hearing announced. Special council session. Friday night. 2 days. That was all we had. The shop became our war room. Quilting frames turned into workstations. The air smelled of starch and printer ink, coffee and fried donuts people kept dropping off. Lucy leaned over her laptop. "We've logged 57 submissions, at least 20 more on the way." "Keep pushing," I said, pinning a square of marigold yellow fabric to a backing. "We need numbers." June was on the phone, voice sharp. "Yes, Mr. Klein, I know it's short notice. But don't you want your wife's garden bench remembered?" "Exactly. Then show up Friday." Every few minutes the bell rang and someone else walked in. A retired teacher with sheet music her students had played in the garden. A young mom with finger paint handprints her kids had pressed on paper during last summer's fair. Even teenagers who usually rolled their eyes at heritage stuff showed up, handing me printed selfies under the lilacs. It hit me, as the pile grew, this wasn't just my mother's memory. It was everyone's. By Wednesday night, exhaustion had me in its claws. My hands shook from too much coffee and too many hours cutting, scanning, sewing. When the shop finally emptied, I slumped onto the couch, head heavy. "I don't know if it's enough," I whispered. Harlow sat across from me, mending a sleeve with the same slow care she gave everything. "It doesn't have to be enough right now. It just has to hold until Friday." "But what if the council doesn't care? What if it's already bought and sold?" She looked up. Needle paused midair. "Then we remind them who they work for. And if they still don't listen, Then we make them listen. Something in her tone sent a shiver through me. Harlow wasn't bluffing. Thursday morning, Trevor appeared again, this time at the shop door. His vest was immaculate, his smile thin as a paper cut. "Mind if I step in?" he asked, already crossing the threshold. I blocked his path. "What do you want?" "Just a friendly chat." His eyes flicked around the room, fabric scraps, poster boards, stacks of photos. "You're pouring a lot of energy into this passion project. But it's a losing battle. The board's with me. The permits are filed. All you're doing is delaying the inevitable." "Then why are you here?" I asked. That smile faltered just enough for me to see the crack. "You've got people stirred up," he said, lowering his voice. "That's messy. Bad optics for everyone. So here's my offer. North Slope funds a new quilt garden. Bigger. Brighter. On the other side of town. We'll even pay for a bronze plaque with your mother's name." The words landed like acid. "A plaque?" My voice rose. "You think you can replace decades of history with a plaque?" Trevor sighed. "Think about it. You could be cutting ribbons, not cutting scraps." I leaned closer. "You don't get it. This isn't fabric. It's memory. And you can't bulldoze memory." Something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance. Maybe even doubt. But then the mask snapped back. "Friday," he said flatly. "We'll see what matters more. Nostalgia or progress." He left, the bell jangling behind him. Harlow's hand found mine. Her voice was low but steady. "We'll show him it's both." That night, as the town slept, we worked under lamplight. The quilt grew slowly, square by square, each block stitched from donated fabric, denim from a farmer's overalls, lace from a wedding veil, corduroy from a child's jacket. Together they formed a map of memory. At midnight, Lucy yawned and slumped forward, cheek on the cutting table. I draped a quilt over her shoulders, heart swelling. We were making something worth standing for. But as the clock ticked past 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a new email alert. From anon.townhall@maplebridge.gov. Subject: Urgent Body. Just saw draft agenda. Friday's special session isn't just about zoning. They're planning a full vote to override the 1998 conservation measure. If it passes, the garden's protection is gone. For good. I read it twice, pulse hammering. They weren't just trying to pave the lot. They were trying to erase forever. I grabbed my coat. "Harlow," I said, shaking her awake. "We can't just wait until Friday. If they overturn that vote, the quilt won't matter." Her eyes sharpened instantly, like steel catching firelight. "Then we don't wait," she said. "We fight tomorrow." Sleep became optional. By dawn Thursday, the shop looked like a command center. Coffee cups stacked in corners, Sharpies bled on poster board. Quilt squares stretched across tables like battle flags. Lucy taped up a handwritten sign in the window. "Storytelling exhibit. Friday night, library, all are welcome. All stories matter." People slowed their cars to read it. Some honked, some pulled over, walked in, and left carrying flyers. It was happening. The story was leaving our hands and moving into the town's bloodstream. But the threat was just as real. At 10 a.m., June barged in, cheeks flushed. They posted the agenda. It's true, they're voting on repealing the 1998 conservation ruling. If it passes, the garden's not protected anymore. They can bulldoze it legally by Monday. The words dropped like a weight in the room. Silence. Then Lucy whispered, "Can they really just erase a forever vote?" Harlow didn't miss a beat. "They can try. But forever isn't theirs to erase." She looked at me then, eyes steady. "We've got 24 hours to turn a garden into a revolution." We split into teams. June handled phone trees, calling everyone she'd ever sold kale to at the co-op. Lucy worked social media, blasting out clips of people telling their garden memories into her phone camera. I took the recordings. Grandmothers recalling quilting circles, veterans describing afternoons on the memorial bench, kids laughing about fireflies in the lilacs, and edited them into a reel. Watching it nearly undid me. These weren't just anecdotes. They were stitches in a fabric that bound the whole town. By noon, local radio had agreed to air the reel during drive time. By 2, the diner promised free pie for anyone wearing a Save the Quilt Garden button. By 5, the fire chief himself dropped off a framed photo of his wife planting daffodils 15 years ago. "She'd haunt me if I didn't back you," he said. The momentum was wildfire, and Trevor felt the smoke. That evening, his SUV pulled up again. This time, he didn't bother with charm. He stormed into the shop, eyes sharp. "You're poisoning the well," he snapped. "Do you even know how much money you're costing this town?" I stood, squaring my shoulders. "Do you know how much memory you're trying to erase? Jobs, growth, infrastructure." His words came clipped. "You think nostalgia pays bills? You think flowers keep kids from moving away?" "No," I shot back. "But roots do." For the first time, his voice cracked. "I'm not the villain here. I grew up in towns like this, places that rotted because no one adapted. I'm trying to give Maplebridge a future." "And in the process," Harlow said quietly, "you're stealing its past." He froze at her words, jaw working, before slamming his clipboard on the counter. "Tomorrow decides. If you lose, I don't want to see another roadblock stunt. Got it?" "Tomorrow decides," I echoed. He left, door rattling. I turned to Harlow, adrenaline flooding me. What if he's right? What if we're just clinging to ghosts? She set her needle down and looked at me with the calm of someone who's weathered storms before. "Sable, ghosts don't scare me. Forgetting them does." That night, we hauled the nearly finished quilt into the library. The community room smelled like lemon cleaner and dust. Under the fluorescent lights, the blocks glowed: marigold yellows, deep indigos, cherry reds. Each square had a tag pinned beside it, a name and a story. Martha Keegan, 1979, prom dress hemmed by Naomi Nakamura. Jonah Reed, 2005, first kiss under the lilacs. Doris Fowler, 1998, vote for in perpetuity. Standing before it, I felt a lump in my throat. "This is more than a quilt," Lucy whispered. "It's proof." "Proof of what?" I asked softly. "That we belong to each other," she said. We worked until midnight, setting up photo boards, arranging benches, testing the projector. Harlow stitched the final block into place with hands that shook from fatigue, but never faltered. When she knotted the last thread, she pressed the quilt flat, exhaled, and whispered, "It's ready." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, my phone buzzed again. From anon.townhall@maplebridge.gov. Subject: Watch out. Body. Just overheard. Trevor's pushing for a closed-door vote before the session even opens. If he gets it, you won't even get to speak. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. They weren't just fighting us in daylight. They were cutting deals in shadows. I looked at Harlow, my voice breaking. "What if they shut us out tomorrow?" She set her thimble down, eyes narrowing with a fire I'd only seen once before, when she buried her sister. "Then we break the door down," she said. We walked out into the night air. The stars were crisp, stitched across a navy sky. The quilt inside seemed to echo them, tiny lights against darkness. Tomorrow would decide everything. But as I stood under those stars, I knew one thing for certain. If Trevor thought memory was fragile, he was about to learn just how sharp a needle could be. Friday night. The library parking lot overflowed, headlights casting long shadows across the lawn. Pickup trucks, beat-up Subarus, even tractors lined the street. People streamed toward the community room in coats and flannels, carrying thermoses, babies, and memories. Inside, the air buzzed. The quilt hung center stage, glowing under soft lights. Around it, storyboards filled with photos and handwritten notes. A speaker played a loop of voices, snippets of laughter, recollections, names whispered like prayers. When I stepped up to adjust the microphone, the room went quiet. My chest tightened. These were my neighbors, my mother's friends, strangers whose kids I once babysat. All waiting, all watching. My name is Sable Nakamura, I began, voice trembling, and this is more than a quilt. It's more than fabric and thread. It's our history, stitched together by hands that came before us. Every square is a story. Every stitch is a promise the town made in 1998, in perpetuity. Forever murmurs rippled, heads nodding. But tonight, that forever is on the line, I said. And we're here to remind the council that forever isn't theirs to sell. Applause broke out, not polite but fierce, like a storm rolling through. At 7 sharp the council filed in, 5 members, 3 men, 2 women, faces drawn tight, the weight of scrutiny heavy. Trevor sat in the front row, arms folded, expression cool. Council Chairwoman Dixon rapped the gavel. This special session is now in order. First item, proposed repeal of the 1998 Memorial Garden designation. Gasps. People muttered, shaking their heads. Dixon raised a hand. Public comment will follow. Please, one at a time. One at a time became a flood. Mrs. Keegan told how Naomi Nakamura hemmed her prom dress while she cried about a boy. June spoke about planting peas with her grandmother. Mr. McBride, voice shaking, described the day his fellow veterans dedicated the bench under the birch. Even the Reed twins, usually too cool for anything, talked about sneaking beers in the lilac grove and feeling, for once, like they belonged somewhere safe. The crowd laughed, then clapped. Every voice was a thread, weaving tighter and tighter around the council. When the last speaker sat, Dixon looked weary. She adjusted her glasses. We appreciate these stories. But the town also faces fiscal realities. Development brings jobs and revenue. Revenue doesn't replace roots, someone shouted. Applause thundered again. Dixon's gavel banged. Order! Trevor rose smoothly, seizing the pause. With respect, this is exactly the problem. Sentiment over progress. I don't dismiss your stories, but nostalgia can't pay for schools, or fix roads, or keep young people here. My company is offering a future. Don't chain Maplebridge to the past. Boos erupted. Someone yelled, "It's not nostalgia, it's us." I stepped forward, heart hammering. You talk about the future like it's something you own. But this garden is our future. Because without roots, there's nothing to grow from. Trevor's eyes locked on mine. Cold. Calculating. You're a good speaker, Sable. But words don't change contracts. Then let the vote speak, I said. The council withdrew for deliberation. The room hummed with nerves, people clutching each other's hands. I stood by the quilt, fingers brushing a square of marigold yellow fabric, my mother's favorite. Harlow came to my side. Her voice was low, meant only for me. Whatever happens, you brought them here. You made them remember. That's already a victory. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. The council returned. Dixon's face was unreadable. She lifted the gavel. The motion before us. Repeal of the 1998 conservation measure. Silence. All in favor? 2 hands rose. All opposed? 2 hands rose. Tie. The 5th councilman, Mr. Latham, gray-haired, stooped, a man who rarely spoke, sat with his hand hovering in the air. The room held its breath. His eyes wandered over the crowd, then landed on the quilt. He studied the square of denim patched with lace. Slowly, his hand lowered. "Opposed," he said. The room exploded. Cheers, clapping, people hugging strangers. The gavel banged, but nobody cared. The motion failed. The garden stood. I pressed my face into Harlow's shoulder, sobbing with relief. She held me tight, whispering, "Forever means forever." But across the room, Trevor's eyes burned holes into me. He stood, calm amidst the chaos, and slipped out the side door. The celebration roared behind me, but dread pooled in my stomach. Because one look at Trevor told me this fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The morning after the vote, Maplebridge felt lighter. Cars honked as they passed the shop. Strangers stopped me on Main Street, clapping me on the shoulder. The local paper ran the headline, "Quilt Garden Saved." For now. That last part gnawed at me. Because while the town cheered, Trevor wasn't celebrating. At noon, a thick envelope slid under the shop door. My name typed in block letters. Inside, legal papers. Notice of litigation. North Slope Development versus Town of Maplebridge, claiming the 1998 conservation vote was procedurally invalid and seeking damages for interference with vested development rights. My stomach dropped. "He's suing the town," I whispered. Harlow scanned the pages, jaw tightening. "He's not giving up. He's escalating." June stormed in just then, holding her phone aloft, and he's taking it public. She shoved the screen at me, Trevor on local TV, polished as ever, talking about special interests clinging to the past and outsiders stifling progress. Outsiders. The word landed like a slap. "He means me," I said quietly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake on Harlow's couch, the quilt pulled over me, mind spinning. If Trevor painted me as an outsider, he could split the town, make people question whether I had the right to fight for land I'd left behind. The truth hurt. I had left. College in Boston, a job in tech. Maplebridge became something I visited, not lived. But hadn't I come back? Didn't that count? At 3 a.m., I sat up and whispered into the dark, "I belong here. I do." The next day, the cracks showed. At the co-op, a man muttered, "Boston girl thinks she runs the place." At the diner, two farmers argued, one saying the quilt garden meant more than money, the other grumbling about tax revenue. Even Lucy came into the shop, eyes wide. "My uncle says developers don't lose lawsuits like this. He says they'll bankrupt the town." Fear spreads faster than hope. I felt it pulling people apart. That evening, I drove out to the garden alone. The marigolds were fading now, their petals curling with the season. I knelt in the dirt, pressing my palms into the soil. "Mom," I whispered, "what do I do?" The wind stirred, carrying the faintest scent of lilacs, though they'd long since gone. I remembered her voice. "When we remember together, we belong together." That was it. Belonging wasn't geography. It was memory. And memory had proof. I grabbed my phone and dialed Lucy. "Wake up the teenagers. We're going digital." By midnight, we launched the campaign, "We Belong Here." Posts flooded in. Photos of prom dresses, garden benches, family reunions, kids catching fireflies, videos of elders telling stories. Teenagers stitched TikToks with the reel we'd made, set to music. "This isn't nostalgia," one caption read. "It's roots." By morning, the hashtag trended statewide. By afternoon, regional news picked it up. Trevor wanted to paint me as an outsider? Fine. I'd show him the town, and the world, standing with me. But just as hope swelled again, a new message pinged my inbox. From anon.townhall@maplebridge.gov. Subject, warning body. Heard Trevor last night. He's not waiting on court. He's pulling strings for an emergency state permit to bypass local zoning. If it's approved, the bulldozers roll next week. I read it 3 times, my hands cold. Next week. All our wins could vanish in days. I looked out the window at the fading garden, lit silver under the moon. We're running out of time, I whispered. And for the first time, I wondered if forever might truly be slipping through my fingers. Rumors of a state permit swirled like smoke. At the diner, someone swore Trevor had lobbyists in Montpellier. At the co-op, others whispered the bulldozers would roll any day. Fear crept into conversations. Is the fight even worth it? But instead of breaking us, it pushed us harder. We went statewide. Videos, radio interviews, flyers at colleges and farmers markets. Our story spread like wildfire, the little Vermont town standing against erasure. Trevor tried to call us nostalgic. We answered with roots. By week's end, we weren't just a town protecting a garden. We were a movement. But deep down, I knew. He wouldn't stop with words or lawsuits. If he couldn't win in daylight, he'd try in the dark. It happened just before dawn. Headlights flickered at the edge of the lane. A shadow slipped through the lilacs, hooded, crouched low. Before I could shout, fabric tore, the sound sharp as a scream. The quilt. I lunged, colliding with the intruder. We crashed into the dirt, the box cutter skittering across stones. For a heartbeat, I saw their eyes, cold, focused, before they shoved me off and vanished into the dark. The quilt hung on the fence, slashed, wounded. Harlow and June came running, horror on their faces. They tried to break it, I gasped. Harlow touched the torn fabric gently. Then we mend. So we did. All night by lamplight we stitched. Brighter colors patched the wounds. By sunrise the quilt looked different. Scarred, yes, but stronger. It didn't just tell our past now. It carried our survival. By morning, word of the attack spread through town. Instead of fear, it lit a fire. Hundreds gathered in the garden. Farmers, students, veterans, young parents with children on their hips. We rehung the quilt on the fence. Its mended seams gleamed like lightning across the fabric. A banner of defiance. I stood before the crowd, voice steady. They thought memory was fragile. They tried to cut us apart. But memory stitches back stronger. This quilt isn't just fabric. It's us. Cheers thundered. Signs lifted. People sang. Trevor never came that day. Neither did his machines. Maybe he realized no bulldozer could roll through a town standing shoulder to shoulder. Weeks later, the council struck down his permit for good. The lawsuit fizzled into nothing. The quilt garden remained, marigolds blazing brighter than ever. But our real victory wasn't land. It was belonging. Under the lilacs one evening, I ran my hands across the quilt. My mother's marigold square stitched beside scars that told new stories. Harlow's voice was soft beside me. Forever means forever. I smiled through tears. Yes, and forever is ours. The wind carried the scent of marigolds, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. A month passed. The marigolds had withered with the frost, but their stalks still stood, stubborn and proud. The lilacs were bare, branches black against the sky. And yet, the garden didn't feel empty. It felt waiting, like a quilt folded for safekeeping. Everywhere I walked in Maplebridge, the story followed me. At the diner, folks still wore "Forever means forever" pins. At the co-op, someone taped a photo of the mended quilt above the cash register. Kids chalked quilt patterns on the sidewalk outside the library. We hadn't just saved a garden. We'd stitched the town together. One evening, I found myself in the shop alone. The quiet pressed gentle, full of memories. On the wall hung the repaired quilt, scars glowing bright in the lamplight. I traced the seams, each patch telling not just a memory but a fight, a night spent stitching, A morning spent shouting, a promise kept. It wasn't perfect. Neither was the town, neither was I, but it was whole, and whole was enough. Harlow joined me, carrying 2 mugs of cider. She looked at the quilt for a long while before speaking. "Your mother would be proud," she said. The words undid me. My throat closed, tears stinging my eyes. "I hope so." "She would," Harlow said firmly. "Not because you saved the garden, but because you remembered why it mattered." I smiled through the tears, pressing my hand flat against the fabric. Warmth seemed to hum under my palm. Later, as I walked home, I passed the garden one last time that season. The air was cold, the ground hard, but in my mind I saw it blazing again. Marigolds like suns, tulips in flight, zinnias bursting like stars. And I knew spring would come. The colors would return. The stories would bloom again. Because forever isn't an empty promise. Forever is a garden you tend, and ours would never be paved.